My name is Steve Johnson, and I'm proud to say I was and still am and always will be a Swilly Boy. I was born in Swilly Crescent, number 8. Today it's called Goodwin Crescent, but for me it will always be Swilly Crescent. Living in Swilly Crescent as a young lad, going to Ford Primary School was heaven. My friends lived in the street and we'd pop into each other's houses. I remember Charles Friend and Elaine Mingo. There may well have been others. The backs of the houses were huge, and I would spend my long summer holidays chasing butterflies in the back. It was a peaceful, happy place to live, and I remember on the trees here, which if my memory is right are limes, I would look for lime caterpillars. And here we have the house of my birth, number 8 Swilly Crescent. I was born in this house, in this bedroom here. It almost never happened because during the war my mother was home one night in an air raid, and she didn't fancy going to the air raid shelter, which was in Anderson at the back of the house. But she lived with my grandparents at the time. They persuaded her to go. Had she not gone, her bedroom, which was in this room here, was the scene of a large curbstone being blown in the air from a road somewhere, crashing through the ceiling and smashing into what would have been her bed. So there you go. I was lucky to get here. On my way to school, I would cross the road, which of course is called Swilly Road. None of this North Prospect Road nonsense. And directly across the road was Greatlands Crescent. It is still much the same way as it always was today. A beautiful, quiet, tree-lined, shady street. Let's not forget, these houses were built after World War I as homes for heroes. And I think by and large they've done incredibly well. This is a beautiful street. Just look at the trees here. All the houses have got open space, large backs. Fantastic. Many of the houses now have been covered in this weatherproof fascia. It looks pretty smart. At the end of this road it takes a left and we go across Woolsey Road. The end here is a little sort of a square, was a place that was very important to me and my mates from Ford School, and every week I'd come here. It was the library and I belonged to the Readers Circle, or was it the Good Readers Circle? We were given a book to read and then we'd come back here and the library staff would ask us questions. And then we'd get a little membership card ticked if we got them correct. And I seem to recall eventually we would get a badge. Unfortunately, this is all that remains. The library was demolished many years ago. Nothing remains. But actually something is still there. Underground, there's a small underground air raid shelter. I bet it's still there. Going past the site of the old library, and I see that the old railings are still here. These were here in the 1950s. I wonder how much older than that they actually are. Across we go, and back in the day I would see my school from here. I can see part of my school from here, but a lot of the area is occupied by the Wolseley Business Park, Lidl's and a Co-op supermarket. And Woolsey Road today is a much bigger road than it used to be, but the shops are still here. Some of you may recall that also round about here was the site of the Ford Workhouse. That only came down, I think, probably about 25 years ago or so. Just here we have some trees. Now these trees played an important part in my life when I was at school. I'm not talking about the palm type ones, but the other ones. So we had two schools here. We had Ford Primary and Ford Secondary. I think I'm standing more or less where the Ford Primary playground was. And these trees were at the bottom of our playground. And I well remember we were scared to go into them because the story was there was a ghost in there. There was a monster in there. There was something not good in there and we should keep away. And we all did. I've got no memory of anybody ever going into those wooded areas. And back in the day it was quite substantial. Today the area, as I said, is occupied by a business park and a supermarket. Yet I'm pretty sure these trees, especially the big ones, were those trees that I was so scared of back in the day. And as we can see, they're quite substantial. So I reckon this tree here caused me grief as a young boy. My walk to school would take me past these houses. This is Auckland Place. There's been some alterations here. Now just about here are new buildings and was probably a continuation of my playground or the playground of the secondary and modern. I can't quite get my head around this today, but I'm in the right area. The road is much as it has always been. I remember the houses individually as I walked along here. Like many boys and girls in those days, I came home from lunch every day. Walked home, walked back. Now just here we've got an alteration in the wall. So it tells me exactly where I am. Just behind here was the infant part of Ford Primary School. Sadly, this was burnt down by arson maybe 30 years ago. I remember my first school mistress here was Miss Fox. Then I had Miss Nanscoyne. Then I had Miss Barrett. Do we notice anything about those names? They're all Miss. Where when I talk to my grandkids today about the names of their school mistresses, they are Mrs. Times have altered. So if I'm correct about being in the exact spot, then the tall trees we can see here in the middle of the image were the trees that we were so scared of that formed the wood where nobody ever went. Even today, the age of 68-ish or so, I can well remember being in the classroom just there, looking out of the window and seeing just here a bomb site. And I knew what it was at an early age because World War II in those days was not far behind. And even today, we've got a brilliant example just here of a bombed building. Nothing alters really. Here we are at the top of Melville Road. And as I became older, I moved from the part of the school on one side of the road to the part of the school on this side of the road here. And the school is still there today. But we must not forget there was another part of the school just where that blue, black and silver vehicles are now parked. And we had our art lessons in there. I well remember the fun I had making a huge, or it wasn't very big, globe of the earth in that building. So as we got older, we went from the school on this side of the road to the school on this side of the road. So I'd have to cross the road. Still the same now. The old school would be just there. And I'd walk around here. That's a lovely house, isn't it? Just there, look at that. And I'd walk along here. I still remember this now. As I'm walking here now, my mind is going back 60 years. I was very happy at this school. In fact, I've always been happy at any school I've ever been to. And this was the entrance to the headmaster's office that was somewhere up there. Yet I recall I would enter the school down here and I would go right into that way there. The school originally was the Cambridge Road School. When I was there, I was a prefect and I belonged to Tavy House. What children do I remember? I remember Charles Friend, Elaine Mingo, Pamela Hambley, Linda Dickinson, my cousin Jane Hortop, Pat Bailey, Sandra Smout, Shirley Dorking, Trevor Broom, Vanessa Hooper. There must be others as well, but time has washed them from my memory. What staff do I remember? At this part of the school, Fred Barry, class 11. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful man. He affected me for the rest of my life by giving me an interest in everything. He taught me to open my eyes, ask questions, look hard, see things that weren't obvious. Top guy. I thank him a lot. Then there was a Mr. Kingdom. I never had him, but I knew him, a nice man. Then there was a younger man, Bennett, nice man. I had him, very, very good. And of course, we mustn't forget the headmaster at the time, my namesake, Mr. Johnson. Very often he would give me a lift in. If he saw me walking along the road, he'd honk and pick me up. Would that be allowed today? Around Christmas time, we would be walked up from the school along here to St Mark's Church. The church as it was then has been rebuilt into a more modern one, and some of the unused space has been used for housing, I believe. Here we would have a Christmas story and I would often be a shepherd. Back in those days, the staff would stick a moustache on me using adhesive. It stuck really, really hard. Can you imagine that today? You had to really pull it off hard. Times have so changed, but they're happy times. It was colder at Christmas time then, And I can so remember how cold St Mark's Church was during those Christmas events. You have a view of the school. I wonder if that's the hall, just about there. It was here I was told that I would never sing. I wanted to join the school choir. I was also told I would never play an instrument because I was tone deaf. It turned out the staff were quite correct, although I'm sure today that would not be said to a young lad of about 8 years old. And then it would be home time, back across the road, which was easier to cross in those days. Oddly enough, the bomb site is very much, in a little way, the same, in the sense that there are only temporary buildings on it, and it's quite overgrown, which is quite odd today, where every inch seems to be built up as much as it's able to be done. As you can see, you wouldn't walk across here so easy today. Sometimes we'd have to go to the post office after school. You can see here that part of the ward damage is still obvious. And that bit of land that's overgrown is apparently like a nature area, which is good. So I'd come down the hill to what was Ford Post Office. Having come down the hill, my memory now comes alive, and I can well remember Susan Dalton living in the off licence with her mum and dad. Remember it very, very well. And then of course across the road we had Ford Post Office. You'd never know, would you now? This is in a day when post offices were absolutely everywhere. Now they're hard to find. And just along here, somewhere on the right, was a young lad from my class called Christopher Pease. And I got a feeling he may have lived in this one here. I could be wrong. We're walking along Alexander Road now. This took me home in a long way around, but was also the home to two of my close relatives. Around about number 105 or so, on the right hand side, my Auntie Frances lived. I think it's the black and white one here, 103 perhaps. I can well remember one Christmas, just like the day before going back to school, sitting in the basement downstairs looking out the window, praying beyond praying for it to snow because I didn't want to go back to school. Sadly, it never ever did, and I went back to school. On the other side of the road, I can't remember the number, lived my Auntie Maud with her husband, Uncle Ron. I should have said that my auntie who lived there was Auntie Frances and my uncle was Uncle Arthur. One of these houses here, and my Uncle Ron, even in those days, always had a car and it shone. Happy days of walking along this road after school, heading home. We're back in Woolsey Road now. The trees hide the spot where the library was, and we're now walking along the extremely wide pavement. I've no idea why it's so wide. It's always been this wide of Woolsey Road shops. This was the bank. The young lady in my class called Alison, I think her father was the manager. It was the trustees bank, and the chemist is still here. And I remember the man in there, the pharmacist, Mr. Bowden. He mixed up medicines by hand. Can you imagine that today? A bit of this, a bit of that, shake the bottle. And also we had the post office along here. You could get virtually everything here in the Woolsey Road shops. This will give you an idea of the shops there today. It also shows how wide that pavement is. Sometimes we'd come back to school walking along here. It's essentially a back lane behind Alexander Road. And the building here on the left fascinated me. Today it's probably got some sort of industrial use. It's got new windows and an air conditioning system. But I remember it as a place of worship. That seems strange, doesn't it, today? And I well remember just about here, as I come around here, somewhere up there was a large wooden crucifix, long gone. So if we were heading this way, we'd be walking along, it's called Melville Terrace Lane. We'd be walking along Crantock Terrace, which had a very important building at the end for me. This is the building here. It was my GP. I remember the names: Dr. Playfair, Dr. Lander, Dr. Coverley. In those days, it was very easy to see a GP same day. Not so simple today. In those days, you didn't ring for an appointment. Very few had phones. You knew that between 9 and 2 or 2 and 5, the doctor was here. You just turn up and you would wait upstairs there in order. Every time someone was asked to enter the doctor's room, a bell would ring and you'd shift up the queue one at a time. Very low tech, very, very efficient. Today it's housing, and the GP practice is still here, but across the road. I have no memories of picking blackberries though, on the side of Woolsey Road, and they're very yummy. I guess in those days the hedge was cut back. Here we see the full length of the shops at Woolsey Road. It's funny how memory works. Standing here now, I've just remembered something. In one of these houses along here on the west side of Woolsey Road was my friend Charles' friend. He lived in an upstairs flat with his mother, who may have been widowed. And I remember, I think it might have been one of these here in the middle, where I had the first experience of my life of tinned mandarins in a flan. And I can remember that day like yesterday. Thank you, Mrs. Friend. We're now back where the story started, where my story started, where the film started, in Swilly Crescent. Hope you found this interesting and it brings back some memories for you. I wonder where my story will end. Thank you.